Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. I can't believe it's the last day of May. Where has the time gone? Who's excited for June? I am Andrea Lowe, the founder of Toronto Event Hub. We are here for another edition of Asian Heritage Month, where I've been featuring and celebrating and supporting local entrepreneurs and business owners of Asian descent for the month of May, which is Asian Heritage Month. And to round off our final, I can't believe it's like my 13th one, but my final Asian Heritage feature, I have Michael Wong here, who is a TES member. If you're part of our Toronto Entrepreneurs and Startups group, he's a TS member and he has started Speak Fluent, which is a speech clinic, and he's also the master behind the Instagram giant To Do Toronto, which has he said 386. I swear I checked this morning and it was 389,000 followers. And if you're not following it already, you should, because it is the largest things to do in Toronto page. And so I get a lot of tips on where to go, if you need date ideas or anniversary ideas, whatever it is. I mean, honestly, it's such a great source. So I'm super excited to have Michael Wong as our final guest today. So without further ado, I'm going to invite him to the stage. Michael, everybody.
Hello. Thanks for
Hello.
having me.
Thanks for making time, because at first I was like, oh, Michael, can you do this? I know you're a busy person running two businesses. So thank you for making time during your lunch break to do this.
Of course.
So, first question I've asked all my guests this month, since we're celebrating Asian Heritage Month, is what is your background and your favorite thing about your culture or heritage?
All right. So I was born in Canada, but my parents were from Hong Kong. And I also spent a good chunk of my life in Hong Kong, and yeah, definitely is a very big part of my, well, how I like what food I like to eat, or like how I do things definitely plays a big part in that. What I uh, do think is my favorite part of the culture, I would say in general is probably food, of course, but also things like maybe having my family to rely on whenever I run into hard times. I think that's definitely a very big part um, of who I like, of my family identity, and the fact that they are there if I need them is a very big mental or psychological safety net.
Great answer. So you're basically a fellow CBC, Chinese born Canadian or Canadian born Chinese, however you like to say it. Um, and tell us a little bit about your, I guess, like business story. And, because you have your speech clinic, you have To Do Toronto, but I mean, tell us like where you first started and how you sort of came to now having these two businesses. And, I'm curious from the Chinese sort of culture, how supportive has your family been throughout your career path?
Yeah, so I'll start off before I got into actual businesses or like starting my own businesses. I was trying to, okay, I'll actually back up all the way to university days,
Okay.
because when I actually started off in grade 12, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Well, back then, of course, you just take the typical path, Asia six pack, three math, three science, and then I have no idea what to do after that. So
Right.
I went to Queens and I said, you know what, I'll just take the doctor path. And I went in for I think it was biochemistry at the time. And then I did it for a couple of years, absolutely hated it. And I said, you know what, I don't want to pursue this path. And so in my third year, I actually ended up pivoting into computer science because I took one course and I randomly really, really enjoyed it. So I started going down the path of programming and development. And so that was actually how I got started with my career, was this really unexpected pivot, which, by the way, my family was definitely not very happy about. But basically, that allowed me to kickstart my career in programming. And throughout this journey, I realized that yeah, it's very important to think about what you actually want to do, what is meaningful to you, and to pursue it no matter like maybe whatever other people say. Because if you believe very strongly in it, you're the one at the end of the day that has to live with your choices. So um, this is basically how I got to like where I did was I said, you know what, I'm going to go against what my parents really wanted me to do, which was just graduate with whatever I started with, which was like in biochem, and to just go on that path. But I would have been a lot more unhappy to take that path. Um, what ended up happening was I continued through this career. Did a lot of side projects. I learned what I really like to do, and that continuous pivoting of going from medical to computer science into marketing and product, and finally into what I am doing now was definitely not where I would have envisioned myself to be like 5 years ago, but um, through these different choices and different paths that I took, kind of take me to where I believe I am meant to be. So
So so you went against like your parents, I guess, and so how were those conversations like, or like how did you change their mind, or are they still kind of like, son, you know, I don't know, because for some of us, like we're like we're doing amazing, and they're like get a real job, and we're like what I'm doing is a real job, like can't you understand that?
yeah, for oh yeah, so my mom was like a tiger parent, so she was like extreme, and so because I changed majors in my third year, I had to take an extra year to graduate, and that did not sit well
Ooh.
with her at all. And I'm talking like the next 8 years after that, every time we had a family dinner, that would be brought up. I don't even know, like it would be out of
Oh, really?
nowhere. It would just come up,
Like what
and
do you
I
mean brought up, like you didn't finish it, you took an extra year, or that like what do you
yeah,
mean?
she said that all like the extra time that you wasted, and so
Oh
it's
man.
just a very like they definitely were not supportive with the decision that I made to pivot into programming. But what I ended up doing was through actually going down this path and creating my own successes, then I tell them, look, you don't really have to bring up the past anymore because I mean, take a look at
Mhm.
what I was able to actually achieve. And so, um, I think in the end of the day, most of what our parents want is for us to have like good careers or like have good outcomes. So if you're able to show that, you know what, it doesn't matter what you thought was the good plan. With my plan, I was able to achieve X, Y, and Z. Then you may be able to actually, well, get them to understand where you are coming from.
Now, for those viewers who don't have tiger parents or might not know what that is, can you give some examples of that? And also, but advice for some people who may not realize, oh crap, I actually have a tiger parent, and some advice maybe on how to address it, and like not because I think about like how I used to deal with my parents, and I'm embarrassed about, oh, like, but there are better ways to handle that now that we're adults now. But how would you like to elaborate on a tiger parent and how to maybe address it better now?
So a tiger parent is basically, um, well, I'm imagining my mom basically, well, beating or really forcing you to go down a very strict path, taking well, when I was young, definitely doing uh, extra work, extra like lessons, studying, extracurriculars, absolutely everything to try to get ahead in life, right? But this typically comes at expense of other things, and I think a very big part of that is in, you get better academics, but your social skills end up lacking, and that's actually something that I realized I had to consciously work towards and improve upon because that was something that I didn't realize how bad my social skills, my empathy, and those skills
Mm.
were because that was not something that I was brought up to even think about. It was all about, all right, what's the outcome? What mark did you get? Are you getting 90s? And are you like going to med school? Or are you like passing or whatever, right? So um, there's definitely pros and cons to that, and whether you have um, like let's say you don't have a target parent, your chances are you probably have way better social skills than I do, and so we just end up having to work on different parts of maybe your own weaknesses, right? And so for everybody you have different things that you have to work on, and part of like what I learned over the years was you have to like self-reflect, you have to really understand where are you strong at, what have like through your upbringing, what have you been able to achieve, and so you know that that's something that you have an advantage in, and then now you think about, okay, where am I lacking? What skills am I have I not been trained, and that I should think about improving upon to become more well-rounded.
Well, that's good. And for you, when I mean, you have two businesses now, and you took a different career path than what your parents wanted. What did it take for you to either realize, or maybe you always wanted to do it? Like, what was that sort of like turning point for you to start um, your first business, and which of the two? And I know even to do Toronto wasn't it started off on something a little different, so you can walk us through that as well.
For sure. So I'll say started off in second year of university actually. I randomly decided to join this program called Summer Company, and so this is something that is really great that is offered by the government, and so you can apply for it where you can get a small couple $1,000s to like put together a business plan, um, do some sort of entrepreneurial venture, and so that was my first time learning about startups and entrepreneurship. And so I actually like bought and sold tablecloths. And that wasn't something that was very successful by any means. But it was something that was my first dabble into it. And so after that point, I started doing some of these random small projects on the side. So I actually, while I was in Queens, I started up a club for entrepreneurs and networking. So that's also one reason why I thought TES was quite interesting. I always have a soft spot in my heart for um, like any sort of networking for entrepreneurs or like get-togethers. And so I realized early that yeah, like it's really important to talk with like-minded people, and everybody desires that, right? Being able to talk with people who think like you or be that you can vibe with. And so from that point on, I would say like my third or fourth year, I started like always having some sort of project on the side. So whether it was maybe coding some like small app or like building some sort of to-do list, I started like kind of mixing my programming background with projects, and so they didn't really go anywhere. Most of them just kind of failed and fizzled out to nothing. But along the way, I learned a lot of interesting ways to either build products or to run businesses, and that sort of led me over the past 10 years to where I am today.
So, and I'm curious, going back a bit to when you say like they either fizzled out or didn't work out. Now, looking back, is that what would you say was the reason? Like, it was actually a bad idea. You just didn't have the drive or passion for those particular projects, or you needed more manpower. Like, what would you say it was really more so?
So there were a couple of different projects that I started. So one of my earliest ones was this proximity-based coupon app, and this was something that was part of this club that that was part of at Queens, and they had an event. So I got together with some random guys, and we started this app. And what ended up happening with that project was we actually had a internal dispute, and we ended up falling out because of
Mm,
how like the corporation was put together. So that was one reason why it failed. But another one was maybe because didn't I only focused on, let's say, building the product, and I didn't think about, all right, now that I have something, actually built something, what do I do with it now, right? How do I actually get users on the platform? How do I sell it? And so I didn't even think about that. Um,
mm,
and there's a lot of projects that follow a similar theme, whether it was because a lack of sales, a lack of understanding for marketing, or maybe even just that like we were so entangled with technical debt that like we just spent all our time building and fixing that we weren't
mm.
focusing on the actual problem.
That's so interesting. I'm sure we can get into more talks about even like because that sounds like so much insight, but also like learnings from that would be very helpful to a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs and business owners. And I know we're gonna run out of time because I want to ask you about that Queens Club that you started and like why aren't you doing it? And there's just as I talk more and more to you, Michael, you just have many layers of things that we can peel and get to know. You're super interesting. But let's get into To Do Toronto or Speak Fluent, because they're both like, really cool businesses but completely different. So I don't know which one you want to talk about first, because I'm sure like one kind of led to the other, or like, since you always do so many side projects.
Exactly.
um yeah, so tell
Yeah.
us.
So yeah, I'll start with To Do Toronto just because that's the one that's been around longer. So it actually started off as a offshoot of a another project that I started. So I'll talk about that one first, which was I'll really briefly touch on that. Just it was a intended to be a app where it would have an algorithm behind it to essentially match make people into groups for meeting new people, for friends, or like just people who want to do stuff together. And we matched it up based on like, let's say, active or social activities, and they'll send you to like places that would fit that category. So we actually built that. I spent a lot of time building out the platform with my friend, and what ended up happening was we built the thing, we built an MVP, and we said, all right, now what? Right? We asked our friends, hey, you want to try this thing out? Give us some feedback. And we were like talking about it, and it didn't really go anywhere. Like we got like maybe small groups of people kind of pressuring people to come out. And I'm sure you know the feeling of how hard it is to actually convince people to commit to like going out to events. And so that was something I really underestimated as a potential barrier. And that's something, obviously, if you're someone who deals with a lot of people, that you recognize as a major problem from like day one. But because I was focused on the product, I didn't really think about that. But one good thing that came out of this project was I actually started To Do Toronto as a with the intent of using it to promote this app, let's say 1 year down the road. And so what ended up happening was that startup ended up fizzling out, and I continued with my partner Conrad to work on To Do Toronto, and over the past 3 4 years, Conrad actually did a ton of work on getting some curating some really good content, and so now we're at this point where we've grown to a pretty significant size, and we want to continue to uh, tell people about what is there to do in Toronto. And we also, along the way, worked with a lot of businesses. I think at this point, probably in the thousands of local businesses, whether it's restaurants, things to do, staycations, maybe even e-commerce stores, just anything who wants to actually like maybe promote themselves to Torontonians. And so that's what we've gone into. And for like where we're trying to go next, we want to take to Toronto to compete with the likes of like BlockTO. We want to be a major brand, and so a lot of what we're focusing now is how do we maybe even run our own events? How do we put our branding out there so we're not just a Instagram channel?
It's incredible what, how you've grown your base. And first of all, your original idea you was sounds like really cool and interesting. So, I'm surprised it didn't like take off the way it should, because it sounds like really useful. But nonetheless, I mean, To Do Toronto, like I said, is a giant on Instagram. Like, that's how I get my ideas for where to go, or where the trendy cafes or patios or lounges are and what's opening. And so, congrats to that, and growing it to such that. And so I want to know, and I've been asking people who come on the show, like, um you know 389,000, like that is insane, and in pretty short time, because every time I think every year I had looked at it when we first met 1 or 2 years ago now, and it's just like, holy crap, like that's a lot. Like, so how, everyone's, says like, the secrets to success, but I mean, for you, what did it take? What is the secret behind growing it to 389,000?
Yeah, so I'll say that there's different parts to growing Instagram channels, and depending on what size you are, the strategy is usually a little bit different. So for let's say you're just starting off, you're a small business owner, and you are, let's say, under 1,000 followers to start, and you want to get the number higher. So the easiest way to do that, I actually wrote a Facebook post about it in the TES group. And what you would do is you want to maybe look for local influencers that are in your niche, that service the demographic that you want. Because what influencers, and a lot of people like don't like the idea of working with influencers because they have a bad rap. But I think that there is a lot of value in tapping into people who have decent sized followings to help kickstart your own growth. Because when you actually have people who know about you, there's a lot of social proofing or like referrals that make it a lot easier once you get to a certain point. Like for example, for me, if I am not growing at least 1,000 or let's say 500 followers a day, that actually is slow for my channel because at some point they see that, oh, I have so many mutual friends with 2D Toronto that they like my friends all know them, they must be reputable. And it's the same idea for a local business, especially if you're an e-commerce or someone who isn't well known. If you don't have anybody following you, you just look like a random page. And so it is very important to try to kickstart that number as aggressively and quickly at the beginning as possible. And so social media influencers can really help you do that. And giveaways or like through like collabs, there's a lot of different ways to do that.
Now, you said it right. Like sometimes the influencers have a bad rap, but in terms of working with influencers, what are some of the best practices or tips? Because do you pay them or do you like give them free things or like what's the best way? How do you pick them? Like give us a little 411 on that.
Yeah, for restaurants, it's usually relatively straightforward, and I'll actually say a lot of e-commerce typically do get away with like, especially micro influencers. I want to say sub 10K followers on Instagram. They usually are happy to like promote you if you just send them free product, or if they eat at the restaurant for free. So that's like a super cheap, like low cost of acquisition way um, to actually get these influencers to promote for you and create content for you. And so now you can use this content on your own page to then continuously pump stuff out, re-engage with your followers. And because the people who typically should be following you should care about your brand, should care about what you have to offer, then you can re-engage them with other types of specials or discounts, offers, to actually try to monetize that. For influencers that are like bigger, I'll say like closer to us, typically you're more likely to be like to pay for that sort of exposure because obviously you're reaching a lot more. And then what I think is important is being able to attribute it to your sales. So if you are working with BlogTO, working with 2D Toronto, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you think about how can I track the people who they're bringing to my doorstep or bringing to my channel. And there's a couple ways to do that. And I'll just give one, which would be, let's say, an affiliate code, right? For example, something that we do is say to the Toronto to get a free booster juice or a free like appetizer, whatever that may be. And right away, okay, well, if they come in and they mention to the Toronto, now you know that this channel is actually helping me drive customers and you can make your marketing decisions accordingly.
Amazing. Love the insights and ideas. Now, speaking of giveaways and contests, as we just talked about influencers, contests, and giveaways. Now, that sometimes has a bad rep in terms of for some people, and I've seen it too because I've hosted some, and it was like you're always afraid that if you do things because obviously you follow us or comment and do whatever action you need them to do, that some people and there are those I forget what the term is of people that look for freebies
Freeloaders.
and content freeloaders.
Uh,
And my friends say I am one of those little like because I always win contests, but there's a strategy. But anyways, going back, but some people are businesses are afraid to maybe do contests or giveaways because the prize could be like of good value, but then you might get all these like follows for a little bit during the contest period, and then they'll just unfollow you
mhm.
afterwards. And I know the whole like you shouldn't care about the followers who aren't going to be engaged and don't fit your audience anyways, but that's one of the concerns about doing contests and giveaways. So what's your take on that? And
Yeah.
for those businesses who are contemplating about working with To Do Toronto or to run a contest, give us like a case study or talk more about that.
Yeah, definitely a great question. So, for giveaways, I think a very big part of this is, first of all, understanding what role marketing plays for your business. And naturally, let's say you take out a billboard ad or you run a radio ad, you're going to have a lot of people who aren't actually your target customers who are going to engage with them. Maybe they look at it and then they just go away. And that's sort of the nature of marketing. You have a funnel. You at the very top, you're going to have a ton of people, and then as it narrows down, you get closer, you get less, but those are the people who actually give you money. And giveaways are a similar theme where at the very top you're going to have a lot of people who are there just for the free stuff, but then they're tagging their friends, and whenever they engage with the post, you start getting more people who see the post who are not necessarily the person or the person being tagged, but actually a third person that are following that person. And this is how you actually end up building the reach of every single post. You get as much engagement as possible, and the people who may not be actually tagged or the taggee would become will actually have the eyeballs to see it, and then they are the ones who actually end up following, maybe not even participating in the contest at all. And so what I would also say is important to think about it from a like marketing spend and then an outcome perspective. So if you give away, let's say let's say you run 10 giveaways and you give away $100 worth of product every single time, then you spent about $1,000 in marketing, essentially a marketing budget. And outside of that, then you would just see you're engaged. Let's say for Tutor Toronto, we might engage with like let's say 60,000 people. 60,000 people seeing it, then you might actually want to see how many dollars came out of that campaign. And when you do it like repeatedly, you'll find that okay, not only did I actually get customers out of it, but I also get a boost in followers. And one more thing that I will mention about followers is that sure, maybe they did follow you to get the free stuff, but they still want your free stuff. They still want your stuff. And that is quite kind of interesting to think about because if they actually like you enough to want to participate and tag all their friends, then you probably can convince either them or their friends through good promotional material on your own page to try to entice them to engage with you further. So it kind of goes back into your marketing strategy. Like, can you take advantage of these giveaways to get you more people to then do your second round of marketing upon?
Now I want to know, um, is there a case study, or I want to know like one of your most interesting giveaway or contest, and I want you to think of one that isn't so common, like a business that isn't, you know what I mean? Because like restaurants, and then I guess there's spas, and then those activity places. But think of one that's like people don't normally think of this business would do such a thing, or it was a really very, very different giveaway than food and drinks and an experience, or I don't know.
So a recent one, the first that comes to mind was a collab that we did where they weren't the restaurant. They were actually the people building stuff for the restaurant. Let's say building the patios for them. And so they wanted to obviously get more restaurant clients. And so what they ended up doing was, well, the regular people aren't going to want to, well, buy like restaurant patio furniture, for example, right? But um, through like what they did was they collabed with let's say the restaurants to be able to offer specials for people to go to that restaurant, so they're supporting their clients while also getting their name on the giveaway, getting the followers for themselves. And that was something that I thought was pretty unique because people who may not necessarily be targeting the Torontonian crowd, but rather the restaurants that are targeting the Torontonian crowd, that
Mm,
were the businesses that we don't typically think about as well, but they obviously have a strong incentive to want to reach more customers. And that was another very interesting way that they were able to engage with their potential customers.
very interesting. Now, before we move on to Speak Fluent, I want to give you a minute here to maybe, if you're comfortable, like letting us know, like, well, how much is an investment to do a contest or giveaway with To Do Toronto, and
Mhm.
what are some, you know, generic metrics you can give to someone of like, if you obviously it ranges on what kind of product or giveaway you do, but what's like an average giveaway contest post on To Do Toronto? Like how does what are the results usually, like a typical on average, like so someone could know the cost investment plus some results.
Yeah. So right now we have essentially three main products. So the first one would be giveaways, which is our our standard bread and butter. So and then we have Reels or TikToks. So let's say that we send someone to the location to showcase experience, and we have one where we let's say send a whole bunch of influencers and do like a media event. And so those are three things that we typically do. So what I'll talk about is giveaways. So giveaways is, like I mentioned, are the most popular one because it's very simple and is the cheapest. So for the post, we usually do it for 250, and that would typically net you between 60 to 80,000 reach. So unique people looking um, at the post and being able to engage with it and whatnot. And what I do like to look at in terms of the metrics, and definitely take a look at my post if you haven't already, would be to look at like sends, shares, and obviously engagement and likes, but and also how many followers you actually get out of it. And I think those are all really great metrics to think about in tying not only as a one-off promotional push, but rather thinking about how can you use this to push your other marketing objectives as well.
I'm actually curious because I think it's a newer feature on Instagram about what a collaboration post is, which is where you can not usually you can just tag a business or so. Are these contest posts usually a collaboration post with the company, or you just do it separate?
It could be either or. So sometimes the collaboration feature is a little bit finicky, so sometimes it doesn't actually work. So right now, like regardless if like we give the insights after the contest is completed. So no matter what, you'll be able to see the numbers. But yeah, otherwise there's like you will always see a boost in the following as well, or
Sweet.
followers. Yeah.
Well, hopefully after this interview, more people can, if you're interested, and Michael, for sure, make sure you post all your contact information in the interview feeds in both the streams because we're streaming on Event Hub and also in TES, and I think also in my LinkedIn. But make sure
Oh,
you put
awesome.
all that contact information. So let's go on time. I want to talk about Speak Fluent
Yep.
because when I had talked to you and discovered about Speak Fluent, and actually another guest speaker, Luki, is actually like small world. We're all connected. But one interesting thing is like about speech therapy that people don't even think about, or they're always thinking only people with like if English is a second language should only use it, or people with accents. But there's so many more uses. I definitely want you to talk about that, but also that I didn't know speech therapy, like a lot of people actually have benefits for this and don't
Hmm.
realize that you could use this, and it's not just again for people who are struggling with English. Like there's actually way more uses for this, so please shed some light on this topic.
Yeah, so most people actually think of speech therapy if in a scenario of wanting, let's say you have a stutter or you have a lisp or you have some sort of like medical issue.
Speech impediment of some
Exactly,
crazy sort,
exactly.
yeah.
And so what like the reason why we actually started this company was because well, as I mentioned earlier, I came from like a tech background, and a lot of the people that I worked with when I was in tech actually did not have the strongest social skills. And that's kind of what happens when you stare at a computer screen for 8 hours every single day. And maybe in a week, if you're lucky, you have like a total combined 30 minutes of face-to-face time with a person. Otherwise, you're just looking at lines of code. And so like I see that a lot, right? And the question is, how do you move into management if you don't know how to communicate with people, right? When you start moving up the corporate ladder, you have to pay attention to the way that you speak, the way that you communicate with stakeholders, with well, upper management, with the people that you manage. And so all of these different aspects of how you communicate really matter. And so what I also realized after working with Angela, who's my partner here at Speak Fluent, was speech therapists actually know quite a lot about communication. Surprise, surprise. But from everything from, let's say, pronunciation, intonation, to like how do you actually use your voice, how do you actually maybe understand what exactly is causing you to, let's say, blank out when you're talking to people, right? Maybe you're standing in
Oh,
front of a crowd of a large crowd of like you're doing a presentation, right? And you're blanking out, or you're on the spot and you completely forget what you want to say, even though you are the subject matter expert. So we actually help a lot of clients get the confidence to speak up in meetings, or let's say to feel good about
Present.
yeah, how to present, and just feel good about like speaking. And so that is something that I realized is a really big opportunity. And as you mentioned, a lot of people don't realize that this is a service that is already covered by their benefits. So it's under speech therapy. And so that's something that we currently are focusing on, which is working with working professionals to help improve their communication and feel confident in the way they speak.
So you're saying, and paraphrasing, like, so that like even if it's presentation skills that you want to like brush up on, that this can be done through speech therapy.
Exactly.
And so I want to know more because it's super interesting. And you know, I, for example, for me, well, I no longer have benefits when we work for ourselves. But, sounds really helpful because even for me, when I do a lot of interviews or IG lives, or I am like tonight, I have a singles event that I have to get up in front of 60 people, and you know, luckily I don't blank out. I'm pretty good at like improvising a lot because you know, but when I see, I just did it right now. It's the ums and ahs that is really hard to get rid of. And so, is that also can be something that's worked on in speech therapy?
Yeah, I mean, if that's something that you find is an issue, right? Because for some people, maybe it is a matter of just you recognizing, hey, I just say a lot of ums, I say a lot of likes, whatever filler words it may be, and I did it too as well. But what what we find is sometimes people come in and they discover something about the way they speak that they didn't even know about, and maybe it could be around the filler words, which is usually pretty obvious for
Common.
most people, right? You start paying attention to to how you sound, or like the way that you speak, right away you'll tell whether or not you say like or whatever, right? But some people, maybe they actually speak way too fast for any general
Mhm.
audience to understand. Maybe some people are just very monotone and they don't sound very engaging to their audience. Or maybe some people just in the way that they phrase their explanations, right? The way that they put together their thoughts and sentences could be improved. And so being able to have that structure sometimes is also something that we help clients with, even though it may not be top of mind when you think about what you could actually improve on.
These are such great points because I think so many of us don't realize, and we're like, oh, I don't need help with that. Like, I'm fine. Especially when we're subject matter experts. Like, yeah, I present all the time. I do this, and but again, if you were to ever watch a recording of yourself or even the audio, you'll know like that's a great reminder about like how fast we talk sometimes, or if there's the filler words to pauses to just, yeah, those are really great things. So now I'm curious, what happens in these sessions? Like how do you guys help people? Like what exercises are there? What can one expect in a session? And are they half an hour? Like how does that all work?
Yeah, so we start off with a 1 hour assessment with a speech therapist. And so this is where they'll start off by, well, getting a sense of what you do and like maybe if there's any areas that you already want to work on. And then from there, they will get you to do a bunch of tests, like go through the entire, like all the different speech sounds. So maybe if you, let's say, for example, for me, I actually used to have, well, I have a even stronger Cantonese accent. And when I say the L sound, it was kind of gone. I was actually missing. So when I said the word cold, I actually said code. So hot and
Mhm,
cold.
mhm, mhm,
And
mhm,
so I actually started focusing on that and to say cold. So the L
mhm.
sound actually was more obvious. And so sometimes it might be a matter of pronunciation, being able to make those specific speech sounds more clear. And
Mm,
then from there, it might also be about explaining a concept. You're given some like let's say logical question, and you have to like explain why it does or doesn't make sense, or maybe how can you put emphasis on different parts of your sentence to sound like to bring more meaning. Because for let's say tonal languages, right? You don't really have to put too much pressure on like certain syllables or certain words, but for English, let's say I put an emphasis on certain words, then that actually makes it almost like in your mind like bolded, right? It stands out, and
mhm.
that's different ways to convey meaning. And that is definitely something that during this assessment, the speech therapist would be able to identify as areas of opportunities. And then after this assessment, you get a report of like where you can improve, and you can set goals together, and subsequent sessions would be then to tackle those goals one by one.
That's so cool. And are you comfortable sharing like what's the cost of the therapy? Just so again, with people with benefits or not, like what does that investment look like?
Yeah, so the initial assessment is $200, and $200, and subsequent sessions are 90 for half an hour sessions, and so these are all, as you mentioned, covered under speech therapy. And one thing I will also mention, that some of our clients actually do this is they also, if they're working in a, let's say, a corporation, they also leverage their training and development budgets, and employee development budgets to put it towards this as well. So if you're trying to, let's say you have like a development plan with your manager, that could be something that you can think about is how can I become a more engaging speaker, or like be better at doing sales calls or whatever it may be. That could be something you can consider as well.
It's amazing. So would you say right now, most of your clientels are more individuals working on their those speech impediments or those kind of things, or more with corporations and their training and development? Would you say the
S-
split is?
So right now, majority is with individuals. We have been working with some corporations as well. So recently, we worked with IBM, we worked with Scotiabank, and we worked with a number of smaller companies as well to do workshops. And so that's something that we're continuing to do. And depending on the specific topic for what a company might be looking for, we tailor our presentations or the workshops. And from there, if people are looking to get even more individualized sessions to improve their own communication, they can book with us directly.
That's amazing. Now, I just came up with an idea,
Mhm.
putting you on the spot of because a lot of what you said in this interview throughout like really resonate. And I'm thinking about Toronto Dating Hub, as you know, with my singles company, where many clients and attendees that I meet, they're not that confident. And I'm sure anyone, I know you're not single anymore, but I'm sure you realize that even with when it comes to dating, going on dates, coming to my singles events, there's a lot of people that are super nervous and they might fumble on what they're saying. And then that creates this not so good impression when they're trying to meet a potential romantic partner. And I would love to, we can flesh this out more, but like, let's do a workshop for singles for how to like gain that confidence, how to present yourselves better.
Mhm.
Because actually, a lot of times I'm helping them with even how to do a 30-second intro. And again, likewise, we can do one for entrepreneurs, right? When you have to make pitches, like if you're ever getting in front of like Dragon's Den and you had to do your sales pitch, or when you're in an elevator, right? When you're like, you have 30 seconds to literally give what your business is all about and do a pitch, and we're all like, oh, like some of us just like can't get the words out or we stutter, whatever it is. This is an amazing thing that we should offer. So let's
Yeah, I
chat.
mean, definitely. I think that for a lot of situations, whether it is dating, presentations, Dragon's Den, pitching, whatever it may be, like even interviews, right? When you're in a state where you are nervous, you're in a
Nervous.
state of like fight or flight, right? Then you start blanking out, you start forgetting what you want to say. And that's definitely something that that we do work with clients to improve. So yeah, like, we definitely chat about that and see if, yeah, if there is interest in with these individuals who are looking to either the entrepreneur group or the dating group that want to improve upon their communication skills and their confidence.
I think learning again what Sharky reminded us in his interview, where, let's not think too much. Let's just like go and execute, and then we can iterate and learn from it. So I'm gonna hold us accountable and try it on both kind of communities. So more on that, guys. And if you're interested, comment below or message us. But I'm definitely gonna make it happen in the near future. So that's really cool. Now, before we wrap things up, since we're talking about business and dating and all that, and you mentioned Angela's name, um, guys know he's not single. His business partner is his partner as well. So my question here is, what are some tips that you have for? Because I had a few other speakers again where their business partner is a partner, and what sort of tips do you have on how can you? Because a lot of people are like, don't mix those two together. So what are some tips that you've learned along the way, that how do you make both successful and not, fight, either personally and in business? How do you make it work?
I think it's very important to be able to create that distinction for yeah, what is business and personal, and being able to separate those so that you don't have one impact the other is very important. So I think the only way that this could ever work is if both partners are very emotionally mature and they're able to detach their feelings from, like, let's say business, and they don't take it into, let's say, the um, personal issues, right? I for I'll say most people it probably is easier to just not go down that path. I think that I am lucky in that Angela is definitely a very mature and emotionally stable person. So that's definitely helped me a lot. Um, but it's definitely a tricky space to be in.
I'm really good at that. She's not around you. She
She she may be.
She is. I've never actually met her. Is she there? I wanna just, like, tell her to pop her head in and say hello.
Nah, she has to jump to another call.
Ah,
She has popped by to look at what I was talking about.
she's like, "You're talking about me, but all good things. All good things, Angela, if you watch this later." Um, so as we wrap things up, I've 2 more questions left. So one in summary with both your businesses and the story you share, which is incredible about your journey. What would you say is like either your biggest lesson or again some final words that you would want to impart on aspiring entrepreneurs and business owners?
I think that one of the biggest takeaways that, well, I've gone in the past while, is that you really need to understand your own strengths and weaknesses, and that's, like, you have to be very comfortable with what you're good at and what you're, like, what you actually end up being really good at. My belief is that it's better for an entrepreneur to excel in certain areas rather than being well-rounded and like being like mediocre in everything. So let's say that you're really good at working with people, then double down on that. Focus specifically on that, and either hire, delegate, or like partner up with someone who can take care of the other aspects of the business, because then you can excel in selling, and you can, well, close all those deals, and you don't have to worry about the other things. And if you find a partner who excels in all the areas that you don't excel, that's even better. And yeah, so I think that is personally one of the biggest takeaways, is really understanding where you stand and how to um, yeah, like delegate those other responsibilities.
And I guess I mean for your own advice there, that's I mean whether you're outsourcing, finding a good business partner that sort of complements you, that's a big reason how you're able to have more than one business, right?
Exactly.
You
Only
can't
reason
do
why I
both.
could run it, yeah, exactly, is because both my companies I have fantastic partners that help me take off significant amounts of my stress, because they help take care of businesses or aspects of the business that I'm not competent in, and so they take that, run with it, and they excel in that area.
Now, this wasn't my final question, but because you're saying about finding a good business partner and all that, so where do you find these business partners? Or like again, for people who are like maybe again their support system isn't so vast, or like a lot of people not even their family support their dreams and
Yeah.
decisions. So what advice do you have since you're so successful in being able to find well not only your business partner but your romantic partner but also like Conrad and your other business, where do you find these business partners or what advice would you give for people who are like how do I get that help?
So I think this advice is probably applicable to solving a lot of other problems as well, which is just do stuff. Like, I found Conrad through just starting this startup, and out of necessity I needed people to help me with things, and he ended up being a friend of a friend of a friend, and we ended up just clicking. And at that time he wasn't actually, like, I wasn't intending for him to be my partner in that project. And what ended up happening was, like we we vibed, or like I thought that, yeah, like he was able to bring things to the table that I definitely needed help with. And naturally, for the subsequent venture, that's where we decided to partner up. And I think through just doing projects, just starting, and kind of like what you mentioned or what Sharky said was, yeah, just do stuff, and along the way, like um, you'll be able to find a lot of people or gain learnings that you wouldn't otherwise would have if you just kind of sat there and waited for the perfect opportunity to line up, perfect person to come by. It never happens like that. You'll find it when you least expect it.
That's great. That's great. And I love how like both you and Sharky like that was like a lot of my the interview, the messaging. I mean, these are all successful people, so definitely listen. So I guess the final part is really what's coming up on the horizon for To Do Toronto or Speak Fluent? Like, do you have upcoming events or workshops or whatever? What can we sort of expect or what's coming soon?
Yeah. Well, for Speak Fluent, we are continuing to expand. That one isn't too fascinating or too interesting in general, or exciting for general people. But if it's something that people are interested in improving their communication skills, then definitely reach out to us and we can have a chat. For Tutor Toronto, we are looking to expand beyond just being an Instagram channel, as I mentioned. And so part of that is we're going to start throwing more events. We're going to start like maybe putting our name on more things that are happening around Toronto. And so definitely, if you're a business owner or like, well, let's start with the people. If you're a regular person looking for things to do, definitely stay tuned for that. And if you're a business owner or someone who's looking to promote your services, definitely give us a shout and we can have a chat.
Amazing. Yeah. And so afterwards, please make sure you comment with all your contact information and websites, handles, all that for everyone who wants to know. But that's been so great talking to you, Michael. I always learn so much from you. And like Justin said, Michael's awesome. What a great and insightful entrepreneur to be connected with. You're so awesome, and again, so inspiring. Thank you for sharing your story, your journey from the tiger parent to like how you just broke away from that, and to having two incredible and very different businesses that are just they're successful and growing. So congratulations on that, and thank you so much for your time. And I hope from this interview that people reach out for whatever business or whatever venture. I certainly am going to reach out, and that idea about the workshops, we're definitely going to make it happen. But thanks so for being inspiring and for your time. Thank
Thanks for
you.
having me.
Thank you. And for everyone, yeah, I can't believe it's our last Asian Heritage Month. I'm going to definitely relax a bit after doing 13 of these, but it's been incredibly inspiring and very insightful to talk to all of you guys. I hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you missed this, watch the recordings later. I know Michael missed some; he was watching it, so I think you found it helpful to even see other entrepreneurs and people that you've met at my meets, but these interviews are really getting into people's journeys or background, and so it's been really interesting. So again, thank you so much, Michael. Thank you to our viewers. Have an awesome rest of May, and it's a really lovely day outside. It's 26 degrees. It's a heat warning, but thank you everybody, and enjoy the rest of May here, Asian Heritage Month in May. But thank you. See you guys
See ya.
soon.